Evan Morales and Jesse Porter were the kind of couple people rooted for. Two men who left the city behind to chase their dream and opened a burger joint in a sleepy Oregon town. 6 months later, one of them was found stabbed to death at the register, and the other was the prime suspect. What began as a love story ended in betrayal, blackmail, and a murder that would shatter the town's illusion of happily ever after. In the heart of a quiet Oregon town, nestled between pine-covered hills and misty lakes, Evan Morales and Jesse Porter arrived with nothing but a borrowed pickup truck, a second-hand griddle, and a dream. The town of Hawthorne wasn't used to newcomers, and definitely not couples like Evan and Jesse, openly gay, artistic, and ambitious. But that didn't stop them. For years they had worked the restaurant circuit in Portland, Evan as a line cook with a natural talent for flavors, Jesse as a barista and social media manager. They met during a catering job, bonded over a shared obsession with food trucks, and spent their nights sketching out a plan for something of their own. By the time they landed in Hawthorne, they were chasing more than just a business. They wanted peace, roots, a slower life with deeper meaning. What they found was a dusty, vacant diner space on Main Street with a rusted-out sign and a sagging roof. Most locals didn't even notice when the lights flickered on late one night as the couple began sweeping floors and scrubbing grease off ancient tiles. Evan poured everything into the kitchen, sometimes working 16-hour days just to get the equipment functioning again. He crafted a menu with intense attention to detail. Thick-cut bacon ground into burger patties, house-made sauces with names like Volcano Aioli, locally baked buns toasted in garlic butter. Jesse, meanwhile, brought the front of house to life. He painted the walls bold colors, hung thrift store art, and created a logo that married 50s diner nostalgia with clean, modern minimalism. When the fire grill finally opened, no one quite knew what to make of it. Townsfolk walked past slowly, peeking in but rarely entering. Some avoided it altogether, the rainbow pin Evan wore on his apron drawing quiet disapproval from older residents. But others, especially the younger crowd, were curious. Word began to spread about the couple from the city with the best damn burgers you ever tasted. The turning point came when a food blogger passing through town posted a glowing review. Within 2 days, cars from nearby towns were lining up out front. People snapped selfies with their burgers, tagged the restaurant on Instagram, and turned the fire grill into a low-key tourist attraction. It was everything Evan and Jesse had hoped for, at least on the surface. Behind the scenes, the pressure mounted. Evan had always been quiet and reserved, more comfortable with a skillet than a conversation. Jesse was the opposite, energetic, social, and quick with a joke. Their strengths complemented each other in theory, but the grind of daily service exposed sharp differences. Evan was a perfectionist who insisted on making every sauce from scratch. Jesse, focused on growing the brand, sometimes pushed for shortcuts, pre-cut fries, cheaper buns, delivery partnerships. They started arguing more. Small things at first, like whether to add vegan options or close on Mondays. But it escalated. Evan felt Jesse was chasing attention over quality. Jesse accused Evan of being stubborn and unwilling to adapt. Still, they showed none of this to the public. They smiled through photos, posted TikToks of late-night prep sessions, and shared inside jokes online that made them look inseparable. Business continued booming. They hired 2 part-time staff members, extended hours, and even caught the eye of a local magazine that wanted to feature them as Oregon's Burger Kings. But the stress was undeniable. Evan began sleeping at the restaurant a few nights a week, claiming he had too much prep to do. Jesse spent more time out of the house, attending local events and networking. No one outside the couple knew that money was already becoming a problem. The renovation costs had gone over budget. Equipment broke down faster than expected. The huge crowds meant huge orders, and with it, huge supply bills. They had maxed out 2 credit cards, and though sales were high, the margins were tight. Jesse, ever the optimist, believed things would stabilize. Evan, more cautious, wasn't so sure. Then came the first letter. One morning, Jesse opened the mailbox to find an unmarked envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sentence made from cut-out magazine letters. "You done belong here." They laughed it off at first, some bitter local angry about change, but Evan's hands trembled as he folded it up. He said nothing, just slid it into a drawer under the register. That night, Evan stayed late cleaning the fryer until nearly 3 a.m. The next morning, Jesse posted a photo of them smiling in front of the grill captioned, "Built with love, fueled by fire." It went viral, thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. Everyone saw a couple living their dream. No one saw what was coming. In the weeks following the viral post, the fire grill transformed from a small-town eatery into a regional hotspot. Food lovers from neighboring cities drove hours just to try the lava stack or snap a selfie with the vibrant mural Jesse had painted on the side of the building. Business was no longer just good. It was overwhelming. Lines wrapped around the corner most evenings, and people routinely waited over an hour to be seated. For a while, the couple soaked in the success. The stress faded under the glow of praise and full tables. Jesse, in particular, thrived in the spotlight. He was suddenly being recognized at the grocery store, asked for selfies at the gas station, even invited to speak at a local business panel. He started wearing tighter shirts, new cologne, and experimenting with flashy accessories. His personal Instagram following doubled in a matter of weeks, and he began posting more frequently. Day-in-the-life videos, behind-the-scenes peeks, taste tests. Some of the posts didn't even include Evan. It became Jesse at the fire grill instead of Evan and Jesse's dream. Evan didn't say much about the shift, but it was clear he felt it. While Jesse was fielding media inquiries and chatting with influencers, Evan was doing inventory, managing staff, fixing the leaking ice machine, and closing most nights alone. When employees called out or supplies ran late, it was Evan who stayed late to cover. Slowly, the sparkle of their success began to dim for him. Then the whispers started. Small towns don't often need proof to form opinions. Jesse had been seen at a local bar without Evan, twice. Once with a man no one recognized. Another time after closing hours laughing over drinks with the bartender. Someone told Evan they thought Jesse was flirting. Others said he was drunk. None of it came with evidence, and Evan never brought it up publicly. But his demeanor changed. The playful tension that once flavored their partnership soured into silence. Evan stopped joining Jesse on the restaurant's social media. In staff meetings, they barely looked at each other. Jesse, when confronted privately by a staff member about the rumors, laughed it off and said, "People love drama when they're bored." But even he started coming home later than usual. In early November, the second letter arrived. This time, it wasn't cryptic. It read, "You're poisoning this town. You and your friend." It had been shoved under the door overnight, wedged between the mat and the wood. Jesse posted a vague note online about haters and staying true to who you are. Followers rallied with supportive comments, hearts, and rainbow emojis. But Evan didn't post anything. He told the staff not to bring it up again. The tension inside the restaurant was becoming harder to ignore. During service, Evan snapped at employees for small mistakes. Jesse missed a few shifts, claiming meetings with potential sponsors or food truck opportunities. They stopped arriving together. Staff said they barely spoke unless they had to. Some started quitting. One cook, after a particularly tense dinner shift, left mid-service and never returned. Still, the customers kept coming. If anything, the growing popularity seemed to create a widening gap between the public image and the private truth. The couple, once so in sync, now seemed to exist in parallel. Evan tethered to the kitchen, Jesse floating somewhere above it all. They stopped celebrating milestones. Their 6-month anniversary came and went with no post, no mention. Then one night, after a particularly hectic Saturday rush, Evan stayed to deep clean the kitchen. He didn't go home until dawn. Jesse hadn't come in at all that day. When Evan finally unlocked the back door and collapsed onto the break room couch, he noticed a receipt sticking out from under the register drawer. It was a dinner bill for a restaurant in Portland, time-stamped for that same night. His name wasn't on it. Evan didn't ask questions. He didn't even take the receipt home. He folded it neatly and slipped it into a stack of invoices. That weekend, he didn't show up at the restaurant. He called out sick for the first time since they opened. Jesse ran the place solo. Staff said he seemed distracted, even anxious. He forgot orders, left the register open, and snapped at a customer. It was the first time anyone had seen Jesse anything less than charming. Nobody could tell whether it was burnout, betrayal, or something else entirely. But something had shifted, and not just between the couple. The restaurant, once buzzing with a kind of magical energy, now felt off. Lights flickered more often. The fryer made strange noises. Customers whispered about long waits and cold food. A place once built on love and passion now felt haunted by something unresolved. And then, barely 2 weeks later, Jesse was dead. The morning Jesse Porter was murdered began like any other. It was gray and quiet, with mist rolling low over the rooftops of downtown Hawthorne. The town was just beginning to wake up. Few cars were on the road, and most storefronts remained shuttered. At the fire grill, Jesse arrived just after 8:15 a.m., 20 minutes earlier than usual. He parked in the back, used his key to enter through the rear door, and disarmed the security system. The camera over the register caught his every move. He flipped on the lights, adjusted the blinds, and began setting up for the day. He brewed coffee, wiped down the counter, and arranged the cash drawer with mechanical precision. Jesse moved slower than usual, less energetic. His movements looked tired, maybe distracted. Some would later speculate that he sensed something was off. By 9:30 a.m., everything was ready. The front door was unlocked, the open sign was lit, and soft indie rock played from the ceiling speakers. No customers had arrived yet, normal for a Thursday morning. Then, at 9:42 a.m., the front door opened. The figure that walked in was unremarkable at first glance. They wore a hooded gray jacket, the hood pulled tightly around their face. They kept their head down and hands in their pockets. They moved quickly toward the counter. Jesse looked up, smiled faintly, and appeared to speak to them. The footage showed about 15 seconds of quiet conversation. Then, abruptly, Jesse's expression changed. His shoulders tensed. He stepped slightly back, one hand hovering near the register. The figure pulled something from their pocket, too fast for Jesse to react. A silver flash. A sharp motion. Jesse jerked backward and disappeared behind the counter. The figure lunged, reaching over, thrusting forward again and again. 3 clean strikes, each hitting the chest or abdomen. Then they turned and calmly walked out the front door. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds. Outside, no one was nearby. The street remained mostly empty. Traffic was light, and the restaurant's front windows were partially fogged over. No witnesses saw the person leave. The security camera by the door caught the shape but not the face, just a blur of movement and the retreating gray jacket. Inside, Jesse lay still behind the counter. Blood pooled quickly on the tile. His phone was in his pocket, untouched. The register was left open, but no money was missing. No drawers rifled through. Nothing else disturbed. It wasn't until after 11 a.m. that someone entered the restaurant. A delivery driver named Marco arrived with a shipment of fresh meat. He knocked at the back door, waited, and then circled to the front. When he entered, the music was still playing. Lights were still on. but no one responded when he called out. He found Jesse S.'s body behind the counter and immediately called 911. Police arrived minutes later and sealed off the scene. News of the murder spread quickly through town, shattering the quiet morning. Customers who had just pulled into the parking lot stood frozen. One woman sobbed into her phone while another ushered her child away from the yellow tape. Evan was at home when he got the call. According to police reports, he arrived at the scene just before noon, breathless and in shock. He collapsed onto the sidewalk when officers confirmed Jesse was dead. Witnesses described him as hysterical, screaming, and incoherent. Detectives began piecing together the timeline immediately. The first strange detail was the lack of robbery. The second was the targeted nature of the attack. Fast, clean, deliberate. Nothing about it looked random. Then came the footage review. Investigators watched it frame by frame. The killer's face was never visible, but their build, posture, and even the way they moved suggested someone young, possibly male and clearly familiar with the layout. They didn't hesitate. They didn't fumble. They didn't panic. Police canvassed nearby businesses for additional footage. One camera at a liquor store 2 blocks away caught someone in a similar jacket running through an alley just minutes after the murder. Still, the footage was grainy, no clear ID. Speculation erupted online. Fans of the Fire Grill flooded comment sections with prayers, conspiracy theories, and outrage. Some believed it was a hate crime. Others insisted it was personal. A few began to accuse Evan outright, pointing to their recent silence on social media, the rumored tension, and Evan's unexpected arrival so soon after the killing. But there was no hard evidence tying Evan to the scene. He wasn't at the restaurant during the time of death, and his fingerprints were only found on commonly touched surfaces. Still, investigators found his timeline suspicious, especially when they discovered he had arrived at the restaurant just 15 minutes after Jesse was killed. The question that haunted police, the town, and everyone who followed the story was simple but chilling. If the murder wasn't random, then who had come to kill Jesse and why? As the investigation deepened, so did the questions surrounding Jesse's murder. The police had no murder weapon, no clear suspect, and only vague security footage showing a hooded figure slipping in and out of the restaurant. There were no signs of forced entry, no theft, no messages left behind. Everything about the killing seemed intentional, targeted, and strangely professional. Attention soon shifted toward Evan Morales. The public had already begun forming theories, fueled by rumors and social media speculation. The couple's once polished image had started to crack in the weeks leading up to the murder, and people noticed. Employees described recent tension between Evan and Jesse, arguments over scheduling, disagreements about finances, even some unexplained absences. What was once dismissed as the normal pressure of running a business now looked like motive. Then detectives uncovered inconsistencies in Evan's account of that morning. He had told officers that he'd been home during the time of the murder, asleep, after pulling a late shift the night before. But the building's rear security camera showed Evan arriving at the restaurant at 10:02 a.m., barely 20 minutes after Jesse was killed, and nearly 2 hours earlier than he had claimed. Investigators asked Evan to clarify. He hesitated, then admitted that he had lied about the time, claiming he was too shocked to remember things clearly. The explanation felt hollow. Things grew more complicated when a forensic technician recovered a deleted text message from Evan's phone. It had been sent 2 days before the murder, to a number listed only as unknown. The message read, "It has to end. I can't do this anymore." No reply was found. The recipient couldn't be identified. The phone number had been deactivated hours after the murder. Evan was brought in for further questioning. He was emotional, cooperative, but guarded. He denied knowing anything about the number or the message. He also denied any knowledge of a life insurance policy investigators found in Jesse's personal files. Police began to suspect that Evan had more to gain from Jesse's death than he had admitted. Financial records revealed that the fire grill had been struggling for months. The viral success and long lines had masked a growing financial crisis. The couple had overextended themselves, taking out a second mortgage, draining savings, and even missing supplier payments. The restaurant was barely breaking even. A fresh influx of cash could have been a way out. Despite the suspicious details, investigators lacked a smoking gun. There was no evidence linking Evan directly to the killer, no fingerprints, no motive that could be proven beyond circumstantial evidence. Still, they pressed forward, expanding the search beyond the couple's inner circle. That's when they found Lila Knox. Lila had worked at the fire grill briefly just under a month before quitting in late October. She had been hired as a part-time prep cook, but left abruptly without notice. When contacted by police, she was hesitant at first. Then, slowly, she opened up. According to Lila, she had once overheard Jesse arguing with a man in the alley behind the restaurant. She didn't catch most of the conversation, but what stood out was Jesse's tone, calm but forceful, and the man's reply, which she described as desperate. She remembered only one clear sentence. "You wouldn't risk ruining your own life over this." Jesse had apparently replied, "Try me." When police showed her security photos of former suppliers and delivery drivers, Lila pointed out one man, Trent Holloway, a vendor from a local meat supplier who had stopped delivering to the fire grill just weeks before the murder. His record showed he'd worked in the area for over a year, but after Jesse's death, he disappeared. Detectives ran Trent's name through criminal databases. What they found surprised them. Trent Holloway was an alias. His real name was Thomas Reese, and he had a sealed juvenile record tied to a violent robbery. No one at the fire grill had known. Jesse, with his tendency to thoroughly vet every vendor, likely found out on his own. Investigators theorized that Jesse had discovered Thomas's real identity and used the information to pressure him into discounted deliveries, or something worse. A one-sided arrangement that may have become volatile. If Jesse pushed too hard, or if Thomas felt trapped, it could explain the attack. The pieces started aligning: a disgraced vendor with a violent past, a conflict overheard by a former employee, and a victim who seemed to be growing careless with whom he challenged. Evan's strange behavior now looked less like guilt and more like grief, tangled with buried fear. 3 months after the murder, a warrant was issued for Thomas Reese's arrest. He was tracked down in a rural town 2 hours away, living under a new alias. When confronted with the evidence, he confessed. He admitted to the killing, claiming it had been a confrontation gone wrong, an argument that turned deadly. He said he panicked. He said he never meant to kill Jesse. But the truth, as always, was more complicated. The arrest of Thomas Reese, formerly known to the fire grill staff as Trent Holloway, brought a flood of relief and disbelief across Hawthorne. For weeks, the town had lived under a cloud of unease and suspicion. The case had gripped locals and strangers alike, fueled by whispers, online theories, and the eerie sense that Jesse Porter's murder had never been random. Now, with a confession in hand, the narrative began to shift, but not in the way anyone expected. When detectives brought Reese in for questioning, he looked nothing like the figure from the grainy security footage. He had lost weight, dyed his hair, and grown a beard. He claimed he had no intention of killing Jesse when he walked into the restaurant that morning. According to him, Jesse had been threatening to expose his criminal past unless he continued supplying meat for free. Reese said he had tried to walk away, but Jesse wouldn't let it go. In his statement, Reese painted a picture of a man, Jesse, who had grown reckless with power. He claimed Jesse enjoyed the leverage he had over people, using charm in public and control in private. Reese said he showed up at the fire grill that day intending to talk one last time. But when Jesse brushed him off and reminded him what was at stake, He snapped. He brought the knife only to intimidate, he claimed, but something in him gave way. He acted on instinct. But investigators weren't entirely convinced. The killing had been too clean, too fast. The stab wounds were deliberate, aimed with precision. Reese never took anything. He didn't even attempt to disguise himself beyond the hooded jacket. And though he claimed it was spontaneous, police found printed directions to the restaurant and a pair of gloves in his car. It looked more like premeditation than panic. During the trial, prosecutors leaned heavily on this evidence. They argued that Reese knew exactly what he was doing and had planned the murder in advance. The defense stuck to the story of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. Evan Morales, still listed as a key witness, attended each day but never took the stand. He looked thinner, older. People said he barely spoke to anyone anymore. What struck everyone most during the proceedings was how many layers of the story were still hidden. Jesse had been deeply admired by the public, but the trial exposed a different side, one that few, if any, had seen. Testimony revealed he had developed a pattern of manipulating vendors. 2 other suppliers came forward, admitting that Jesse had threatened negative reviews or public exposure if they didn't give him discounts. It didn't justify what happened, but it painted a more complicated picture of a man who had seemed so perfect to the outside world. Evan never publicly commented on these revelations. When asked by reporters whether he knew about Jesse's behavior, he simply shook his head and walked away. Privately, some believed he had suspected something but chose to stay silent to protect the image of their business and maybe his own heart. Reese was ultimately convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court ruled that the act had been intentional, though not fully premeditated. The judge called the crime a collision of secrets, pressure, and desperation. For many, the sentence brought closure. For Evan, it brought only silence. After the trial, Evan returned to Hawthorne briefly to close the restaurant for good. He didn't hold a memorial, didn't announce a farewell. One day he showed up with a moving truck, loaded the kitchen equipment, and left town. Locals said he stood in front of the mural Jesse had painted, touched the edge of the wall, and whispered something before driving away. The fire grill was never reopened. The building sat vacant for months, then years. Dust gathered on the windows. The bright logo on the front sign faded from sun and rain. Someone eventually spray-painted over the mural. The space that once held so much energy, hope, and tragedy became just another forgotten storefront. The town moved on, slowly. But for those who had stood in line for burgers, watched the couple smile through Instagram stories, or believed in the dream they sold, the story never really ended. It lingered, in the headlines archived online, in the rumors that still surfaced from time to time, and in the quiet realization that even the most beautiful dreams can hide something dark beneath. Evan was last seen in Seattle, reportedly working in a small bakery under someone else's name. He's kept out of the public eye, refusing interviews, avoiding social media. Jesse's grave lies in a quiet cemetery not far from Hawthorne, marked only by a simple stone. Loved, lost, remembered. The rest of the story, what truly broke between them, what secrets were never uncovered, remains buried, like so many truths, just beneath the surface.